Welcome to CNN Talk. We are talking elephants, aren't we?
You don't sound that excited about them.
No, well, I'm quite surprised personally by the decision of the...
This is the level of debate Zoe's going to indulge
They're
in.
super cute. You've just never
But
seen
a decision
anything
to
cuter.
go back on a hunting restriction.
Yeah. I mean, I think
We're talking about Botswana.
when individual governments make a decision like this, that it is because they feel like they're at the front line of having to protect biodiversity for the world, and they're not getting any credit for it.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, so I think it's a terrible decision, but you could kind of see it coming. I think.
Shall I play devil's advocate here for a moment?
Yeah.
What you think you should?
There
kill
should be
elephants?
hunting.
Well, no, there are occasions when populations of particular animals do need to be controlled for all sorts of different reasons. And this, the Botswana government is saying one of them. Now, I'm not sure I wholly believe the reasons that they've given, but we can't just go from the premise that they're very cute animals, so therefore they have to be protected in a way that you wouldn't do for any other animal that was becoming overpopulated.
I mean, the thing is, with this kind of to what degree should you protect any species, and is there a kind of hierarchy of species?
Of course there is.
Obviously, there is a hierarchy of species, but it's kind of absurd that there should be. Obviously, when you destroy biodiversity in some areas, you have an impact on other animals, and sometimes that impact is that there are more of them rather than fewer. But I think the general mood...
You said fewer, not less.
I think the general mood is we're really in crisis with species extinction, and you know, a third
not in Botswana.
Nevertheless, but when you're kind of, it's mood music, isn't it? When you're in crisis with species extinction generally, and you're looking down a third of species in the world being extinct within a kind of recognisable time frame, it's just very depressing when people put other concerns, you know, sort of less important managerial concerns ahead of...
But given the population of elephants in Africa has fallen by 111,000 to 415,000, yet in Botswana it's increasing, the Botswanan government must be doing something right.
Yeah, but it will be good to see them just cooperating.
What's your understanding of the reasoning? They're effectively saying elephants can be pests as well.
Yeah, they're saying that basically that if there's too many of them, that they can destroy crops and they can trample on crops and they can eat crops. But there's also another statistic in here saying that actually attacks on humans have gone up as well. So that is how they're justifying it. But interestingly as well, there are other countries near Botswana, like Namibia, Zambia and Zimbabwe, who have also called for this global ban on the elephant ivory trade to be relaxed as well. And I think that is, you know, I think that does send out a bad signal, because the UN did this big report recently, as Zoe was saying, about species that are like getting extinct at the moment. And actually kind of the African elephant is on that list, along with the lion and the hippo. And we also see these, you know, we always see these grotesque pictures of these hunters, you know, felling their prey. And they don't just stop at elephants. Imagine, you know, if we have a situation where the African elephant is wiped out, the lion is wiped out. I mean, that would just be awful. I mean, all species do matter, but you know, those big things that we particularly think of. So I do think it's hard to just look at this just in Botswana individually. And also, I think it's also in terms of how those countries want to diversify their economies. Do they just want to be a place for kind of rich, privileged white people to come along and shoot their animals?
Can they use that, though, and say you can shoot that elderly elephant and pay a lot of money for it and then use that for conservation in other areas?
Oh, Max, that's a horrible idea.
Ian Dale.
Speaking of elderly elephants.
Oh, my goodness.
She just shot you.
I did have a retort then, but I stopped myself from saying it.
Don't worry, somebody recommends a product called Drunken Elephant.
This is really disintegrated.
What was your question, Max?
Ask Zoe. She was graced with an actual response.
Max's question, which I think is the most evil thing I've ever
But that
heard,
is a system in places.
Shall we let some elderly American dentists come and shoot the pointless elephants and then
But they
spend
do
the
do
money
that in some parts of Africa.
conserving other elephants? Look, I think there's a principle thing here, and we're not taking seriously what it feels like when a species does become extinct. I was in... Shall I shut up?
No.
Okay, I was in Kenya when the last rhino died, and German geneticists who are apparently like at the cutting edge of global sperm work.
Welcome to CNN Talk. We're talking about this latest move in an African country, Botswana, where they are sort of lifting restrictions on elephant hunting. The question we're asking you, elephants versus economics, what's more important?
Good news for hunters in Botswana, bad news for the elephants. The government has lifted the country's ban on hunting.
The hunting ban was opposed in 2014 and attempted to deter poaching.
But the government now says elephants raid crops, kill livestock, and destroy water supplies.
They say that scores of people have been killed and injured by elephants over recent years.
27,000 of those elephants are having direct encounters and conflict with the small farmers in the rural communities.
Is the challenge that human beings are encroaching on their ecosystem and we're getting tremendous competition?
The government of Botswana says they'll give out some 400 licenses for hunting elephant in the coming years, each year.
And the environment minister insists their responsibility toward conservation has not changed.
Botswana have never advocated for mass slaughter, and that will never happen in Botswana.
Is there no other solution?
Isabel on Facebook says hunting bans should not be lifted except for human safety and survival. James says elephants deserve protection. Phil says elephants are way more important. No sympathy for the Botswanan code that's being developed at the moment. What do you understand it to be?
So it looks like Botswana is going to reverse a ban that has been in place for quite some time. And they're saying that it's... They're justifying it by saying there's been a sharp increase in the number of elephants and that this is having an impact on the livelihoods of farmers. It's saying that these elephants are trampling over a lot of crops, they're eating a lot of crops and even attacking people. But I think I would be against this move because I think other countries would do it as well, the neighbouring countries around Botswana. And look, the world is... There's two things, really. First of all, the UN has just done a report saying that there's loads of species which are now on a danger list, and that includes the African elephant. Secondly, I do think as a sort of civilization, we're trying to move away from just kind of hunting things. We've all been appalled by those horrible pictures of those sort of, largely American people, and largely large American people as well, actually sort of like having shot some animal. And it's just like, can we not do better than that as like a sort of society? But also that there's a really interesting point that people have made as well, which is, even if you lifted the hunting ban, it wouldn't actually have that much of an effect on the overall population. And actually, if elephants aren't stupid, we know that elephants are quite intelligent, and it might make them more aggressive if they see that they've just been hunted and attacked and about to be shot at the whole time. So people are kind of saying that it's not actually that well thought through a strategy.
Those who've been trying to protect elephants point to these numbers, Ian. That's not the right set of numbers. Where are we? Anyway, I can take you through that. A trophy fee for an elephant is $29,000. Trophy fee for a lion is $49,000. It's very, very expensive to be involved in this sport. And they're going into this country where this is part of wildlife, but the local government is supporting it.
But it's also really unthinkable.
Hang on, he was talking to me, sorry.
I know.
I know you're new to the programme.
I'm not, that's outrageous. I think I just feel much more strongly about elephants than you do.
What was your question, Max?
How do you feel about the government effectively allowing, trophy hunters to come into the country?
I hate the idea of trophy hunting. I feel exactly the same as Aisha on that. However, I am slightly nervous about a bunch of white Western people telling black Africans what they're supposed to do in their own country. It is a form of 21st century colonialism where we think we know best. And I object to it just as much as Aisha, but I'm not going to say to the Botswanan government, sorry, you can't do that because we think we know better.
I mean, I don't think that's valid, really. The thing is, you can say it's a form of colonialism to have any moral standards that differ from any other country that isn't your own country. But you wouldn't say, I'm not going to... You wouldn't look at a kind of slave trade and say, well, I'm not going to use my historical stroke imperialist opinions and decry that. You would say, morally, I think that's the wrong thing to do. And morally, I think this kind of human supremacy and the supremacy of human economics over other species is wrong. And I don't think, and I wouldn't say that was a colonial or a racist point.
Sometimes in the world of conservation, you do have to have culls. We know about deer culls. When I was a kid growing up on a farm in East Anglia, the whole of East Anglia was overrun by rabbits, and they were eating the crops. So what did the farmers do, and what did I do? I would go and shoot the rabbits.
No, but the point is that when you have kind of human interventions in ecosystems, you do have impacts on species, which often come via other species. And actually, no, that's not what I was saying. I was saying that you have an impact. You might have an impact where you've desecrated one population, and that involves means a boost for another population. That doesn't mean you've had a positive impact on that population. That means you shouldn't have desecrated the first.
Let's just have a look at the elephant number decline, which I was trying to bring up earlier. So earlier 20th century, there were 10 million African elephants. And now we're looking at 352,000, which is why a lot of conservationists are so concerned about this latest move.
I think it is. So where my parents are from originally is a place called Assam in India, and it was really renowned for having lots of different wildlife there. And it's like, for example, like the tiger is completely extinct there, and that's really sad. Like, you know, you can go and they've tried to set up like a sort of a wildlife park, and it is. I mean, there's still the rhino there, but even that is under threat as well. And that, for me, when I last went to India, when I went to Assam, I was really struck by that, by like my kind of uncles and stuff saying actually there just aren't any of these species left. And it was like, wow, that is kind of pretty sort of stark. And it's not just the African elephant, it's the lion and it's the hippo. I do take your point about, you know, mind you, it doesn't stop us like kind of making pronouncements on how other countries...
No,
I mean, come on, it doesn't quite... I mean...
Look, we can't all three agree on this. We've got to have a bit of debate.
But the other thing as well, and your point, is in terms of the colonialism, first of all, the colonialism is there because we... British white people went and Europeans went and colonialised. And actually, if you look at who the people that are coming in to do the trophy hunting, who are probably quite influential with the government there, and because they have a lot of money, again, it's probably European, white, colonial-type people coming in.
Are we saying that this is about trophy hunting, that they're going to give licences to trophy hunters, or is it licences to people, or they're going to pay people to just go and cull a certain number of elephants?
No, it looks like it's a relaxing of the elephant ivory trade, which would signify it's trophy hunting and selling.
Export legally.
But you see, you've got here the Zimbabwean Minister for Information. It's 13 years since they were last able to sell commercial ivory. He says our ivory, I'm assuming it's a he, our ivory stockpile is worth over $300 million, which we can't sell because countries without elephants are telling those with elephants what to do with their animals. Now, I do think that's a fair point to make.
Well, to be honest, I've got no objection to finding some means of certifying the ivory that's already been killed so you can sell it if you want to sell it. As opposed to crushing it. Yeah. It seems pointless otherwise.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think there's a real danger whenever you talk about a kind of environmental story and you try and put nature in this cost-benefit analysis with economics or even a cost-benefit analysis with politics, that you don't take seriously how much it means to us, you know. And when the last white rhino died, the last on Earth, I was in Kenya, and people were genuinely devastated, you know. Rhinos are horrible, bad-tempered, grumpy. They'll attack you as soon as look at you. The only thing going for them in terms of an attack scenario is that they can't see very well, so you might be able to get away. But you know, the loss of these majestic creatures for rubbish reasons, inaction, economics, trophy hunting, the loss of something so beautiful is devastating, and if you're having to kind of explain to somebody why that's worth $1 million, then you've already lost.
Okay, this from BK. I'm from Botswana. The elephants cause erosion, kill people, destroy livelihoods, etc. Are we having a sort of colonial view of elephents from London?
Again, I think there has to be sort of a balanced discussion. I do take the point that there
does... I'm trying to provide the balance.
we know we're really in trouble.
So I do think that, like, obviously individual countries, and as Ian said, like, individual sort of, if you run a big farm, then you do have to think about pest control and all of that stuff. But I do think you can't just look at it in the isolation. When the UN has, you know, just this very, very stark, very, like, weighty, well-researched publication came out saying, look, there are so many species on a danger list now, and this will have a profound impact on our nature and our ecosystem. I do think we have to sort of it's a bit like the climate change argument, you know. You can always sort of say, well, you know, individual countries can say, look, well, we've got to do our own thing individually, but actually you do have to look at the world in aggregate.
This might surprise you, Ian. Countries where elephant hunting is legal. So you've got Zimbabwe, Zambia, Namibia, Botswana and South Africa. A lot of people aren't aware of this, and perhaps we shouldn't be focusing on Botswana, even though it's the latest move.
Well, in Botswana, it's been illegal for the last 14 years. So, I mean, I don't know how long it's been legal in the other countries. I suspect there are restrictions on it. I can't believe that all of those countries just allow
not a
free-for-all elephant hunting.
Killing any animal for trophies is a big no for survival of Africa. It's different. He's saying, you know, we shouldn't be allowing that type of hunting, but then, you know, we need to find out more about the sort of hunting that's being allowed. If local communities are allowed to hunt, does that make it different?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, there is... The spirit recoils at the sight of an American dentist travelling halfway across the world to kill a giraffe. I mean, we've seen that. Whenever you see a picture like that, you feel physically sick.
We concentrate on Americans. It is other countries too.
Yeah, sure. But it does make you physically sick. And I think that's very different to, OK, this elephant is running rampage through my village and killed and crushed somebody and I killed it. Of course, that's different. But nevertheless, there are, you know, we are in a biodiversity crisis. We are facing the extinction of a lot of species. And I think the priority should be, how do we stop these species going extinct?
Well, what I don't buy is this argument that, oh, well, because elephants have killed scores of people over the last however many years, that is an argument. Because a lot of people shouldn't probably be near the elephants in the first place. If they are ripping up and eating crops that the local population exist on, survive on, that, I think, is a slightly different matter, a very different argument, a much more convincing argument.
Let's just have a look at this from David Mackenzie. He's been on the ground in Botswana with a ranger, and he discovered a dead elephant. Just want to warn you that if you don't like these images, then turn away.
You've grown up in this country. You are from Botswana. What is it like to see these magnificent beasts killed like this?
I don't think anybody in the world has seen the number of dead elephants that I've seen over the last 2 years of the Great Elephant Census. And for me, this becomes a lot more personal.
It's not very nice to look at.
Oh, it's devastating, isn't it? I mean, it's, you know, there's a reason we respond so intensely to, you know, to elephants, giraffes, hippos, dogs. I mean, we respond intensely because it's part of your empathetic core to kind of feel fellowship with creatures.
But
it really is.
You're right, it is, and I feel exactly the same way as you on this. However, we are in England. People in Botswana and other South African countries, I suspect, have a rather different feeling sometimes. There'll be a lot of people who think this exactly the same way as we do, but we have been brought up to sort of fetishise almost animals like this because of the movies that we see, sort of the Born Free films that we grew up on, the television programmes, Wild at Heart, I don't know if you remember that one, where sort of British people go and take over a landholding in South Africa and they live this wonderful life, but every episode there's a crisis. And we love watching things like that, but we don't live the day-to-day, and therefore I think we do have to defer sometimes to people on the ground.
I really disagree that we've been kind of culturally conditioned to love elephants. Honestly, when you see an elephant, you are not thinking, oh, I've seen Wild at Heart. This definitely speaks to my cinematic back catalogue. You think, this is a beautiful, majestic creature. You just do.
Of course.
And I don't actually, and I think it's quite kind of post-colonial to say people in Botswana don't feel like that. The likelihood, the probability is that they do
Let's hear
feel
from
like
the
that.
Botswanan Minister of Environment and Wildlife.
This is fundamental for those who criticize us and they talk about what they think we are going to do. Botswana have never advocated for mass slaughter, and that will never happen in Botswana. This is why we have dedicated 40% of our country to conservation, wildlife management areas, forest reserves, parks. This is the commitment that and the sacrifice that Botswana have made all these years to ensure we are the safe haven for wildlife.
John says hunting any animals is for barbaric idiots. And Roger on Facebook says, having spent much time in Africa, this is a gutless pastime for moneyed cowards. What do you think? Let us know on our Facebook feed.
There are a lot of ethics involved here, aren't there? Because, again, I grew up in the countryside. My views now I've lived in, well, I still live in the countryside, actually, but I've become...
After your rabbit massacres...
I've become, well, there are other massacres as well.
In some countries, I'm sure.
What a shut down over here.
My father belonged to...
Was.
Sorry,
Do you want me to go
Do
on?
go on, yeah.
My father belonged to a pheasant shooting syndicate, so they would breed pheasants, let them loose in the woods, and then when the pheasant shooting season started, they would go every other week on a pheasant shoot, and I would go as well. At the age of 13 or 14, I was shooting pheasants with a shotgun. Now, would I ever shoot a pheasant now? No, I would not, because I've become metropolitanised.
But would you go clay pigeon shooting?
I have done it once,
I'm
but
trying
it
to
wasn't a great
I did
success.
it. Me doing it once was terrible.
Whether you stop doing it because you're rubbish or stop doing it because of ethics.
I didn't really enjoy it. I was rubbish. I completely agree.
You don't have to take that.
But it is
Really
an entirely...
personal.
What I'm trying to explain is it is an entirely different mindset. If you've grown up in the countryside, if you've lived all your life in the countryside, you have totally different values to people who've spent their entire lives in London, Zoe Williams.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. That does not mean it's right. And I think that kind of culture thing about, oh, well, we've always just done it, so it's all right. It's like fox hunting. I mean, I find fox hunting absolutely horrific, and I love horse riding.
Foxes have to be controlled.
Yeah, but why do you have to get like about 1,000 horses to chase them with dogs and stuff? It's so barbaric.
I don't disagree.
We're talking about Botswana lifting the ban on hunting elephants. It's very controversial. Most people on our Facebook feed thinking it's a terrible idea, but some people are defending it as well. I vote for the animals, says Saudia. Diane says, Ian, I'm a South African and I do know better. This is murder for money. But you're not here defending this
I'm
move,
not.
are you?
I'm just trying to explain there are two sides to this debate. If you want me to come down on one side, OK, I'll come down on the side of not culling. But I think we have to recognise that there is an argument. In the Facebook sessions, Aisha and I were just having a bit of an argument over fox hunting, which I've always been against, because even at the age of 7, when the horses and hounds would come over my dad's farm and trample on the crops, I remember going out there and taking them on and saying, get off our land, how dare you do this?
Can I...
without a gun.
Can I point out...
just finally, the fox population has to be controlled. Foxes are vermin. They absolutely ruin areas if their population gets out of control.
Can I point out that nobody suffers more from the pest of foxes than the urban metropolitan elite, and you don't see us going around killing them with 100 horses.
Get your responses in.
Like, yeah, see around Camden, honestly. But I also think let's just call this out. Let's give this a name. Also, the type of people that go on this sort of hunting malarkey, whether they go to Botswana, whether they go on like a fox hunt, there is a certain type of person, and I'm sorry, it's pretty brutal, and they're pretty brutal.
No, you see, this is where you are absolutely wrong. When I was a parliamentary candidate in Norfolk, where hunting is a big thing, and I mean, that's the only lie I've ever told in politics. About the selection meeting, I made out I was in favour of fox hunting, because I knew that if I didn't say that, I wouldn't get selected.
Wow, you
so I had to go.
individual.
I know, I wouldn't do that now. But they go to these places, and a lot of them are working class people who go on these hunts. They're not just the toffs who are on the horses.
Yeah, but there's quite a lot of toffs involved, let's be honest. And the people that are going out to Botswana, I think they're like out of Africa or something like that. And it's just like this kind of ridiculous colonial...
something on without comment. Yeah, you can. Yes, show me something.
You can, but I just want to show you this. These graphics are slightly confusing me today. So these are the US ivory rules. Let's look at this. Sport hunter trophies can be exported. Sale of antique ivory products pre-1990 is allowed, and museums can import pre-1996. But you were talking about crushing ivory earlier, and how that's not necessarily a good idea. And the reasons they do it is this: the pieces lose their value, it's hard to burn, crushing eliminates fire pollution as well, which is something we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
But it also makes the existing ivory more valuable, right?
Well, yeah, of course, it kind of intensifies the rarity value, but also it's that kind of needless, pointless waste of things just because you've made a policy in which the thing is no longer able to be sold. I don't really agree with it. I don't, it's not beyond the wit of man to find a way to outlaw the hunting of elephants without stockpiling $300 million worth of ivory. It cannot be beyond the wit of man. They just haven't found the right way yet. I wanted to tell Ian something. Am I allowed?
Go for it.
Okay, so when we were in Kenya mourning the loss of the last white elephant, one of the guys
it was a rhino.
Sorry, white rhino, not the white elephant. Those don't exist.
They're really rare.
One of the guys at the place had called his dog Brexit. I passed that on without comment, but it is quite a
Shortened to Rex.
It is quite a posh thing to do.
Athena says the elephant population is dwindling across the globe. If Botswana has an abundance, they should be relocated. And they do have a lot of elephants. Botswana is home to 130,000 elephants, which is the most in Africa. So if one country is allowed to do this, can it be Botswana?
Can they not, like, export some of their elephants and, like, share some of their elephants?
Share the elephants with
Where would
Kenya.
you like to export them to?
There are other
Norfolk?
parts that, like, need elephants.
The thing is, you think of the elephant problem as, like, very intractable in terms of, are they destroying crops? Are they destroying people? But actually, what they do when they are trying to... You think, how could you build a fence strong enough to withstand an elephant? But what they do is just build a little trench, and elephants don't really like going in trenches. So it's not that hard to keep them out of areas that you want to keep them out of.
Elephants can't defend themselves from brutality. Let's protect them, says Ellen. And Varghese says, let's find ways to coexist with the animals instead of killing them. But they are enormous.
Look, they are
dangerous.
They
animal,
are enormous, and certainly, like, I've seen elephants up close in India. Like when I remember being a wee girl going back there, and like there was like a kind of a rogue elephant like in our village, and it had trampled a lot of things. I think it did have to be shot in the end. So sometimes those things do have to happen. But I think nobody would argue about the need for like genuine control, and that happens anywhere with agriculture and farming. And look, we have done it in this country, and we've got rich off, and you can dispute the rights and wrongs of that. Ian is right to a certain degree. Countries have their own agency in terms of how they want to sort of run. But I think where there's quite a clear line is how you control the elephant population, and not just the elephant population. If you are saying, right, let's just get all the trophy hunters in, let's sort of glamorize, let's make kind of this sort of cruel hunting okay again, and I think that's where a lot of people have issue with it. And it doesn't actually, part of the hunting thing, it is the thrill of the chase. They're not doing it to significantly get like a huge number down in a short space of time. If you were really going to do that from a clinical point of view, you wouldn't have all the paraphernalia. You would have proper huntsmen doing that.
That's exactly the point. And we don't know exactly what system the Botswana government are going to introduce. But if they had licensed marksmen whose job it was to go in particular areas where there is an issue, to go and cull them, I mean, that's one thing. Allowing trophy hunters to do it, I think, is quite something else.
Unless they can raise funds for a country that needs funds in the process.
Well, I'd rather they raise funds than selling the ivory, frankly. I think Zoe is absolutely right on this. It is so distasteful, and it's not often I say that.
No.
It's so distasteful.
I've never heard you say it.
And we
just letting it digest.
In 10 years. We see in our tabloid newspapers these pictures of not just Americans, but they are largely Americans. Sometimes members of the royal family have been pictured with culled animals. And I don't know whether the tabloids think it sells newspapers to show these pictures, and that there is some secret desire among the people that buy the newspapers to want to see pictures like this. To me, it is completely off-putting. I don't want to see these pictures.
Some elephants in the wild. David Mackenzie was up in a helicopter in Botswana.
Hundreds of aircrew counted elephants in 18 countries across the continent over 2 years.
Elephant 7. 7 elephants, right?
Flying the distance to the moon and then some. Their results more shocking than anyone imagined.
We spent thousands of hours on transects, flying over areas where elephants historically occurred, but are no longer present in these habitats.
Killed for their ivory, in 7 short years up to 2014, elephant numbers dropped by a staggering amount, almost 1/3. Across Africa, their numbers are crashing. If nothing changes, the elephant population will halve in less than a decade. In some areas, they will go extinct.
We're talking about the hunting ban being lifted there, but MJ, another comment here from Botswana. This is a serious situation. I lived up in the north of Botswana where I saw what elephants are capable of. So the comments coming in from Botswana are very different from the ones around this table.
Around 2/3 of this table.
What? No. You don't agree with hunting elephants either. Just admit it.
I don't agree with the mass slaughter of elephants, but I come back to the point I made right at the beginning that it's all very well for us to sit here. We're not in situ. Sometimes you should let the local people decide what is best.
The thing is, there is something much more important at stake than whether or not you've kind of found a cultural division to kind of pin the issue on, and you know, that is, if we don't start taking biodiversity seriously, if we don't start taking extinction seriously, it will be too late. That's what extinction means. So every time a country decides to put economic well-being or security of crops ahead of the
but in
long-term
Botswana,
security
there's no
of its
danger of
species.
extinction. The numbers are going up. That's why they need to do it.
Yeah, no, the spike is like very small in a very limited time frame. But since, you know, we saw the figures, this population has fallen by really, really radical amounts, from 10 million to 350,000. Saying, well, now we've got a spike of 10% on last year does not alter the long-term trend, which is
like
downwards.
It's a kind of a ruse by the government to get back into the country lucrative foreign trophy shoots. And actually, one of the comments
got no proof of that at all.
One of the comments just that one of the
we spend our lives
on supposition. It's absolutely fine to do a bit of supposition. We all do supposition. We all do supposition. But one of the comments that just came up was basically, look, if locals need to do it, let locals do it.
Right.
Don't let. Why do you have to have foreigners coming in?
Yes.
Yeah.
But then
Orlando says let locals do it if it's needed.
Exactly.
Not
And
foreigners.
I think that's right. But I think where the like the foreign thing comes in is, again, that can be lucrative, those foreign hunts, and there definitely is a bit of a trickle down from that. But then it's like, is that the sort of economy you want? And we, like to say, we think we're all agreed that that sort of trophy hunting is a bad thing.
We've got to leave it there. Ian doesn't agree with you, I can tell. Thank you for watching.
I was still reeling.
So we'll end on agreement. Thank you for watching. You can listen again on Apple Podcasts.